My name is Clara Reeves, and for years I was the afterthought, the one who never mattered enough to be remembered. Birthdays passed like any other day, celebrations were for everyone but me, and silence became the only gift I ever received. I used to think that if I worked harder, loved louder, or smiled brighter, maybe they'd finally notice me, but they never did. So I stopped waiting. I built my success in silence, turned every ignored moment into motivation, and when I finally bought myself the gift that marked how far I'd come, they appeared. Suddenly, the family who never had time for me wanted to claim my light. But what they didn't know was that this time, I wasn't the same Clara anymore. They say family is supposed to be your first home. But for me, that home was built on silence. My name is Clara Reeves, and growing up, I learned quickly that being invisible was easier than being disappointed. Every year, as my birthday crept closer, I would sit by the kitchen window, pretending not to care. I'd watch the sunlight spill across the old wooden table, hoping maybe this time they'd remember. But the day would come and go like any other. No candles, no cake, not even a passing happy birthday. My parents would argue about bills, my brother would scroll through his phone, and I'd just sit there, trying to swallow the ache in my throat. When I was 12, I baked myself a cupcake, one I made from a half-used mix I found in the back of the pantry. I lit a single match, whispered a wish that someone, anyone, would see me, and blew it out before the smoke alarm could betray me. It wasn't sadness that burned in my chest that night, it was something deeper. A quiet understanding that love in my house was conditional, and I had somehow failed to meet the terms. As the years passed, I became the expert in pretending. I learned to laugh at their jokes, to clap for their successes, and to disappear when I wasn't needed, which was most of the time. I remember one Christmas when my brother unwrapped a brand new gaming console while I got a pair of secondhand shoes. Be grateful, Clara, my mother had said, with that tired voice that made everything sound like my fault. So I smiled, said thank you, and tucked the shoes under my bed like they were gold. But deep inside, I started building walls, one uncelebrated birthday at a time. By the time I reached high school, I had stopped expecting anything at all. I poured myself into studies, into part-time jobs, into dreams no one else cared to ask about. When my report card came home with straight A's, my father barely looked up from his newspaper. "That's what you're supposed to do," he said flatly, as if excellence was the bare minimum. I nodded, pretending it didn't matter. But that night, lying awake, I promised myself something. I would become someone impossible to overlook. It started small. I joined a debate club, learned how to make my voice steady even when my hands shook. I got scholarships, worked late shifts, and watched my life slowly take shape outside of their shadow. Every success, every achievement became a quiet rebellion, a message they'd never hear. I'm worth seeing. And when I turned 18, I packed my bags and left. No goodbye note, no tears, just the echo of an empty house and a girl determined to prove her worth to the world that forgot her. The first night away from home didn't feel like freedom. It felt like falling. The city lights outside my window flickered like tiny stars that didn't belong to me yet. I was standing in a rented room no bigger than a walk-in closet, the kind that smelled faintly of paint and loneliness. My savings were small, my future uncertain, and yet for the first time I could breathe. There was no one shouting my name from the next room, no eyes rolling at my dreams, no reminder that I was too much or not enough. It was terrifying, but it was mine. I got a job at a small cafe on the corner of Maple and Fifth. Morning started before sunrise, with the hiss of the espresso machine and the hum of quiet music filling the air. I used to watch customers come in dressed in suits, holding phones, looking like they had lives full of purpose. I wondered what it felt like to belong somewhere. But slowly, the cafe became my classroom. I learned people, not just their orders, but their stories. The exhausted mother who found 10 minutes of peace in her latte. The old man who came every Wednesday and called me sunshine. Each of them saw me, even if just for a moment. And that was something my family never did. At night, I'd take online courses, my laptop balanced on the same table where I counted every dollar of my tips. Business management, marketing, finance, words I barely understood at first, but learned to love. Every click, every note, every late night was a step closer to something I couldn't yet name. Some nights, exhaustion would hit hard. I'd stare at my reflection in the mirror, my eyes red from lack of sleep, whispering, "You're doing this for her, the girl they forgot." Years passed in that rhythm: work, study, repeat. The girl who once whispered wishes over a cupcake was slowly becoming someone sharper, stronger. I got promoted to assistant manager, then cafe supervisor. By the time I was 25, I knew how to run the place better than the owner himself. That's when I realized I didn't just want to work for someone, I wanted to build something of my own. So I saved every tip, every extra shift, every spare moment. I studied how businesses grew, how brands were born, how confidence could be built from nothing but grit. I watched my dreams take form like sketches on a fogged up window, faint but getting clearer. And with each passing year, I felt the version of me that once begged for attention fade away. Still, there were nights when doubt crept in, the old voice that sounded like my father saying, "You'll never make it on your own." But I had learned something powerful. You can't unsee your own worth once you found it. So I kept going. Every sunrise became a reminder that I was building more than a career. I was building proof. Proof that I could be everything they said I couldn't. And when I signed my first business loan papers, hands trembling but heart steady, I smiled through the tears. That was the first real gift I gave myself, the taste of independence. I didn't know it yet, but it was only the beginning. The world would soon know my name, and so would the family that once pretended I didn't exist. The day I opened my first office, it didn't look like much. Just a tiny rented space above a bookstore with creaky floors and a single window that refused to stay open. But to me, it was everything. The walls were bare, the furniture secondhand, and the air smelled faintly of fresh paint and possibility. I remember sitting on the floor, surrounded by papers and coffee cups, whispering to myself, "This is where it begins." It wasn't about success yet. It was about survival, about proving that I could turn all that silence from my past into something that spoke loudly enough for the world to hear. I named my company Revon, a quiet nod to my last name, Reeves, and the idea of rebirth. My dream was simple but powerful: to build a business that made people feel seen. It started with just me, a laptop that overheated every hour, and a list of clients I didn't have yet. Days blurred into nights as I cold emailed, pitched, designed, and failed, over and over again. Every rejection stung like an echo of my parents' voices, but instead of breaking me, it pushed me. Each no became a brick in the foundation of the woman I was becoming. Money was tight. I ate instant noodles more times than I can count, skipped nights of sleep, and often worked until dawn. My friends went out, celebrated promotions, bought new clothes. I was too busy trying to keep the lights on. But there was something electric about the struggle. Every morning when I unlocked that office door, I felt alive. I was building something that no one could take away from me. Not their doubts, not their absence, not their judgment. After 6 months of hustling, my first major client came through. a small local brand that took a chance on me. I worked harder than I ever had in my life, pouring every ounce of creativity into their project. When it succeeded, word spread. Slowly, new clients started coming in. One became two, two became five, and soon the tiny office that once echoed with emptiness started buzzing with energy. I hired my first employee, a bright eyed intern who reminded me of myself at 18, hungry, hopeful, invisible to the world, but determined to be seen. There were setbacks too: contracts lost, deals that fell apart at the last minute, nights I almost gave up. But every failure taught me something my parents never could: that resilience is louder than approval. I didn't need them to see me anymore. I was starting to see myself clearly. And then the turning point came. A national company discovered my work online. They wanted a full branding package and gave me a deadline so short it felt impossible. I said yes anyway. For 3 weeks, I barely slept, surviving on coffee and adrenaline. When the final presentation ended, the client's lead executive looked at me and said, "You've built something remarkable, Clara." That sentence felt like oxygen. For the first time, I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. That contract changed everything. Revon became more than a dream. It became a name people started to recognize. I moved into a larger office, hired a team, and signed a long-term lease. Each step felt like another layer of armor, forged from years of neglect and doubt. But what I didn't know is that success has a way of drawing out the people who once disappeared. And soon enough, the family that never remembered my birthdays would start remembering me. It began with a single message, one I almost didn't open. "Hey Clara, long time no see," it read. Signed by my brother, Ethan. My chest tightened as I stared at the screen. The same brother who hadn't spoken to me in years. The last time we'd been in the same room, he'd called me a failure chasing fairy tales. And now, suddenly, he wanted to catch up. I didn't reply, not right away. But that message was the first ripple in the still water of my new life. It wasn't long before more followed. My mother commenting on a LinkedIn post, my father's number flashing on my phone after nearly a decade of silence. It was strange how success could make ghosts return from the past. By then, Ravine was no longer a small dream. It was a thriving company with a glass-walled office, a growing team, and my name on the door. I was being invited to business panels, featured in articles, and asked to speak about young female entrepreneurship. The girl who once blew out a match for her birthday was now signing contracts worth more than her parents' annual income. But the strange thing about success is that it doesn't erase the ache. It only gives it a spotlight. At first, their sudden warmth felt harmless. Awkward dinners, forced smiles, conversations drenched in politeness. My father would call occasionally, pretending to check in, while subtly asking about my company. My mother began sending me texts filled with emojis and questions about how I managed to make it all work. For a while, I convinced myself they were trying, but deep down, something felt off. Their words were soft, but their eyes were calculating. It wasn't love returning, it was curiosity, envy dressed up as concern. I started noticing small things. My brother, Ethan, would show up at my office just to see the place, then wander around asking questions about clients, profits, and investors. Once he even took a photo of my workspace without asking. "Just showing Mom how far you've come," he said, with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. It didn't sit right with me. The same brother who mocked my dreams now wanted to know every detail of how I'd built them. I told myself I was being paranoid, but I wasn't. The real shift came when Revon landed a massive international deal. The news was all over social media. Within days, my parents called asking if I could come home for dinner. A little celebration, my mother said. Something in her tone made my stomach twist. Still, I went. Maybe I needed closure. Maybe I wanted to see for myself if they were truly proud. The dinner table looked the same as it had years ago. The same chipped plates, the same tired curtains. But this time, I wasn't the quiet girl sitting at the edge. I was the woman at the center. My father poured me wine, his hands shaking slightly. "We always knew you'd do well," he said, his voice heavy with something that wasn't quite sincerity. My mother nodded, smiling too widely. "You're an inspiration, Clara. Your father and I were actually thinking maybe we could invest in your company. Keep it in the family." The words hit me like a slap. Keep it in the family. The same family that never believed in me now wanted a share of what I built? I stared at them, realizing their pride wasn't pride at all. It was greed. My success had become a mirror reflecting everything they weren't, and they couldn't stand it. I smiled politely, took a slow sip of my wine, and said, "Revon doesn't need investors." My father's jaw tightened, my mother's smile faltered, and in that silence, the truth settled between us like dust. Over the next few weeks, the calls became colder. My father stopped pretending. My mother sent shorter messages. Ethan disappeared again, until I heard from a client that someone had tried to undercut one of my contracts using insider information. My blood ran cold. It didn't take long to trace the leak back to Ethan. He'd been reaching out to competitors, sharing details he'd overheard during his visits to my office. I confronted him, my voice shaking, not with fear, but with fury. I said, "You wanted what I have, but you never had what it took to build it." He didn't deny it. He just shrugged and muttered, "You owe us, Clara. You wouldn't be here without family." I laughed, a sound colder than I meant it to be. I said, "Exactly. I'm here because of family, because of everything you weren't." That was the moment I decided I had enough. I wasn't going to let them take what I bled for. If they wanted to see what I'd become, I would show them, but not the way they expected. Because sometimes revenge doesn't come in rage. It comes in silence, in success, in showing them that your peace is something they can't touch. It happened on a quiet Sunday morning, the kind that smelled of rain and new beginnings. I was sitting in my apartment, surrounded by the skyline I used to dream about from my childhood bedroom. My company was thriving beyond anything I could have imagined, and for the first time, I felt still. Not proud, not angry, just whole. That's when the thought came to me. I'd spent my life giving pieces of myself away to earn love, to prove worth, to fight for a place that never existed. But this time, I wanted to give something to myself, something that no one could take, minimize, or claim credit for. So I bought it, the gift, not out of vanity or revenge, but as a symbol, a reminder of the girl who survived being unseen. It wasn't just any gift. It was the one thing I used to stare at through shop windows as a teenager, wishing I could afford it someday. A sleek black car, elegant and powerful, the kind that turned heads not because of its price tag, but because of what it represented: freedom. I remember running my hand across the smooth curve of the hood the day it arrived, my reflection staring back at me. I whispered, "You did it, Clara. You did it without them." That afternoon, I drove for hours, wind tangling through my hair, city lights blurring into streaks of gold. Each turn of the wheel felt like erasing another memory of the girl they once called useless. I wasn't chasing anyone's approval anymore. I was celebrating survival. For the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt unstoppable. Later that week, I posted a picture of the car, not as a boast, but as gratitude. The caption read, "A gift to the girl who never gave up." Within hours, the post exploded. Messages, congratulations, interviews. Everyone wanted a story. And then, just as I expected, the phone rang. My mother's voice trembled through the line. "Clara, we saw your post. That car is beautiful. Your father and I were just talking. We'd love to come see it. Maybe celebrate?" I almost laughed. They hadn't shown up for a single one of my birthdays, yet here they were, suddenly ready to celebrate when there was something expensive to admire. Part of me wanted to hang up, but another part of me, the one that had learned to face pain head on, said yes. The day they arrived, I stood by the car, waiting. My father stepped out first, dressed sharper than usual, pretending not to be impressed. My mother's eyes sparkled with awe and envy all at once. "It's incredible," she said, running her hand across the door. "We're so proud of you, Clara." I smiled, calm and steady. "Thank you," I said. "I bought it for myself." The silence that followed was heavy. My father shifted uncomfortably. My mother forced a smile. They couldn't stand that the gift wasn't theirs to give, that my success no longer needed their approval. We stood there for a while, the three of us, in the driveway of my independence. The engine purred softly, a heartbeat of its own, and for the first time, I didn't need their applause. They had come for the gift, but what they found was a woman they no longer recognized, a woman who didn't need them to see her anymore. As they left, my father turned and said quietly, "You've changed." I smiled. "I was always this person. You just never looked closely enough to see her." That night, I parked the car under the city lights and sat inside for a long time, staring at my reflection in the glass. I wasn't angry anymore. The revenge wasn't in showing them what I had. It was in realizing I didn't need them to understand what I'd become. But fate has a way of testing peace. And just when I thought I was free of them, the past wasn't quite done with me yet. It started with the knock on my office door. Firm, deliberate, the kind that carried history with it. When I looked up from my desk, I saw my assistant standing there, hesitant. "Clara," she said softly, "there's someone here to see you. He says he's your father." For a moment, I froze. I hadn't heard that title, my father, spoken in my office before. My heart began to thud, but my face stayed calm. "Send him in," I said. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. Time had softened his sharpness, but not his pride. He looked around the office, the polished floors, the awards on the wall, the quiet efficiency of people who believed in me, and for once, he didn't have words. I stood and folded my hands, waiting. "You've done well," he said finally, voice rough with age. I nodded, expression unreadable. "I know," I replied. He sat down across from me, his eyes darting around as if searching for something to criticize. "Your mother's not been well," he began. "She worries about you, about how distant you've become." I almost laughed, but the sound caught in my throat. Distant? I wanted to ask him where that concern had been when I was 12 and eating a cupcake alone. But I didn't.
I'd learned that silence sometimes spoke louder than confrontation. After a pause, he cleared his throat. "Ethan's struggling," he said. "He lost his job. I thought maybe you could help him. He's family, after all." There it was again. That word. Family. A word they only remembered when they needed something. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking softly. "And what makes you think I can fix that?" I asked. His eyes narrowed, maybe surprised by my calmness. "Because you have the means now," he said. "And we supported you when we could." That broke something in me, not in anger, but in finality. I leaned forward, my voice low but steady. "No, you didn't. You ignored me when I needed you most. You called me useless. You forgot every birthday, every victory. And now that I've built something on my own, you come here not for me, but for what I have." He looked away, jaw clenched, guilt flickering across his face. For a second, I saw the man I used to call Dad, the one I wished had seen me back then. But the moment passed. He stood up slowly and said, "I hope you'll reconsider." I didn't answer. I simply nodded to my assistant. "Please show him out." When the door closed behind him, I sat there, trembling, not from fear, but release. The little girl inside me, the one who once waited for their approval, was finally gone. All that remained was the woman who had learned to stand alone. That night, I drove again. The same car humming beneath me, the city glowing in quiet rhythm. I passed familiar streets, the old neighborhood, the house I once called home. The windows were dark, the curtains still faded. I stopped for a moment, watching the place where my story began. And then I smiled. Not in bitterness, but in peace. Because I finally understood. Revenge doesn't always mean destruction. Sometimes it's walking away from the people who once broke you, without needing them to see the scars. But life has a way of circling back, and before long, something would happen that would test just how much I'd truly healed. A few months passed after that meeting with my father, and I thought the chapter was closed. I had buried the bitterness, locked it away behind the walls of my success, and convinced myself I had moved on. But healing has a strange way of testing you. Just when you think you've conquered the pain, life places it right back in front of you. It was late on a Thursday evening when I got the call. I was in a boardroom finishing a presentation when my phone started vibrating against the glass table. My assistant whispered, "It's urgent. It's from the hospital." I stepped outside, my heart beat loud in my ears. "Miss Reeves," a nurse said softly, "your mother's been admitted. It's serious." The world seemed to blur around me. For a moment, I had just stood there, torn between past and present, between the little girl who longed for love and the woman who learned to live without it. Then I whispered, "I'm on my way." When I walked into the hospital room, the sterile scent of antiseptic hit me like a memory. My mother lay pale against the white sheets, tubes running from her arm, her breathing shallow. My father sat beside her, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. When he saw me, his eyes filled with relief and something else, shame. "She's been asking for you," he said quietly. I moved closer, and when my mother's eyes opened, they softened. "Clara," she breathed, her voice thin. "You came." I wanted to say something sharp, something that reminded her how many times she hadn't shown up for me, but the words never came. Instead, I took her hand, frail, cold and trembling. "Of course I did," I said. For hours we sat in silence. The monitors beeped softly, time stretching and folding into itself. Finally, she spoke. "I wasn't a good mother," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "I didn't know how to love you the way you deserved. I saw your strength as defiance and your dreams as a rebellion. But you were just trying to be seen, and I looked away." Something inside me broke, quietly, painfully, like glass cracking under pressure. I had imagined this moment so many times, rehearsed what I'd say if she ever apologized. But standing there, the anger didn't feel powerful anymore. It felt heavy, useless. I realized I didn't need revenge, I needed release. I squeezed her hand gently. I said softly, "You hurt me, but you also taught me how strong I could be. I forgive you." Her eyes closed, a single tear sliding down her cheek. "Thank you." Those were the last words she ever said to me. She passed away 2 days later. At the funeral, I stood quietly, watching the sky shift from gray to gold. My father stood beside me, shoulders bent under the weight of regret. For the first time, I didn't feel angered toward him, just distance. He had made his choices, and so had I. As the service ended, I walked away before anyone else. The wind carried the scent of rain again, just like the morning I bought myself that car. I realized then that forgiveness wasn't weakness. It was freedom. I had spent years proving my worth to those who couldn't see it. Now, I no longer needed to. The gift I gave myself wasn't the car, the company, or the success. It was peace, the ability to stand tall, look back, and know that I had turned my pain into purpose. But even peace, I would learn, comes with one final test: the choice between holding on and letting go completely.
After my mother's funeral, the world felt strangely still. The noise of my life, the meetings, the success, the noise of proving myself, quieted in a way I hadn't expected. It was as if grief had turned down the volume of everything around me, forcing me to sit in silence with myself. For the first time, I wasn't chasing anything, not approval, not revenge, not even validation. I was just existing. And it felt both terrifying and peaceful. One afternoon, I drove out to the old neighborhood where I grew up. The streets seemed smaller, the houses older. I parked near our former home, the one that had held so many echoes of arguments and slammed doors. I sat there for a long time, watching the sunlight dance across the cracked pavement, until a group of kids ran past, laughing freely. Their joy cut through the weight in my chest. That was the childhood I'd always wanted. Carefree, warm, safe. For a moment, I mourned the version of me who never got it. Then I smiled because I had become the woman she needed all along. Later that week, I was invited to speak at a leadership event, something I would have once brushed off. But this time, I said yes. Standing on that stage, facing hundreds of people, I didn't talk about business strategies or profit margins. I talked about failure, about rejection, about being called useless, and how those words had carved deep wounds that became my greatest teachers. I saw faces soften, eyes well up. When I finished, the crowd rose to their feet, and the applause didn't feel like validation. It felt like connection. For the first time, I understood that my story wasn't just mine. It was a mirror for others still trapped in their own pain. That night, as I walked through the quiet city streets, I felt lighter. The skyline glimmered with endless possibility, and I thought of my parents, not with bitterness, but gratitude. They had given me the push I didn't know I needed. Their absence had taught me self-reliance,
Their words had forced me to listen to my own. A few weeks later, I returned to the same car dealership where this story truly began, the day I bought myself that gift, that symbol of self-worth. I asked to see the manager, and when he came out, I smiled. "I'd like to donate this car," I told him. He blinked, surprised. "Are you sure? It's a beautiful piece." I nodded. Yes, it served its purpose. Now it's time for someone else to feel what I felt that day. Freedom. As I handed over the keys, a strange calm washed over me. It wasn't about the car anymore. It was about release. The past no longer had chains on me. I wasn't proving anything. I wasn't hiding from anything. I had forgiven, healed, and finally let go. On the drive home, this time in a modest, simple car, I rolled down the windows and let the wind tangle through my hair. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold, and for the first time in my life, I didn't need anyone's permission to feel proud. The voice inside me whispered softly, "You made it." And in that moment, I realized the truth. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't success or wealth or recognition. It's peace, the kind of peace that comes when you no longer need to prove your worth to anyone, because you already know it yourself. That was the real gift I bought myself.